The Gub has become one of the most infamous items in Borderlands 2 because it's the single most powerful weapon in the game. Wait, no, I read that wrong. It's because it's an abysmal piece of garbage disguised as a gun that belongs in a dumpster. Wow, I read that really wrong. Yeah, everyone seems to think that the Gub is terrible, and that's for two main reasons. Those reasons are JoltsDude139 and Lil Gas Mask. Jolts is cursed. He can't play Borderlands 2 for more than 5 minutes without finding a Gub. It's become a running joke at this point, and because of that running joke, Gas Mask had the idea to beat the game at OP10 using only the Gub. That run certainly wasn't easy, so the dumpster thing was probably true, right? Well, Gas Mask intentionally uses builds that are pretty bad to make his challenges more difficult and interesting. And Jolts just finds Gubs constantly. The joke isn't necessarily that it's a bad gun. Despite that, I've heard a lot of mixed opinions, but more of a Steam review kind of mixed, where it actually just means bad. I have trust issues, so the only logical thing to do is beat the game using only the Gub with an optimized build to answer the question once and for all, how good is the Gub? Now, of course, if you want to see me do this with other guns, go ahead and leave a comment telling me what you want to see me use. First of all, what is the Gub? It's a legendary bandit pistol that fires slow-moving projectiles, and relative to the ammo cost per shot, it has the second largest mag size in the game, topping out at 187, only beaten out by the Madhouse. It can only be corrosive, which is a little unfortunate, and everything else about it you'll see during the run. Let's talk about the rules. Skip to these timestamps if you don't care. The rules are the same as they were in the KerBlaster video, so I'm not going to go into quite as much detail. I'll put the link to that video in the description. I'm playing in Ultimate Vault Hunter mode at level 80. The only gun I can have equipped at any time is the Gub. I'm going to be trying to make a build that is as optimized as possible to really give the item the best case scenario. However, I will not be using any items that require killing raid bosses, and finally, badass rank is turned off. I'm playing as Zero. Here's the build. I'm using a non-unique adaptive shield, a level 1 magic missile for slag, a sheriff's badge for a little more, actually a lot more pistol damage and fire rate, and a legendary killer class mod. Some of you will probably say that a stalker class mod would have been better because it's straight up just built for pistols, but when I tested them, I found that as long as I was able to get crits, the killer comm actually had a higher damage potential. If I couldn't get crits, then the stalker comm was absolutely better. But the Gub has an impressive accuracy of 85. Which is basically 100, so I decided to overestimate my abilities and go for the more skill-based build. Stalker would have been better. Either way, the damage was so similar, it wouldn't have mattered much. I'm also using 3 different Gubs. This one shoots 2 bullets at once, so it has a really high DPS. This one has the best possible accuracy, probably. And this one's just well-rounded overall. I'm also timing the run, so we have an easy metric to compare the guns to each other. You might think that since some characters are faster than others, and I'm using a different character for each gun, that using a timer might be a flawed metric. Yeah. Claptrap decided to monologue while standing completely still, wasting my precious time, but eventually I was able to follow him off the cliff and fight the bullymongs, and I killed them surprisingly easily. On the second one, I got a lot of body shots, so the health bar didn't really move, but then I managed to get the headshots that I needed, and oh my god, I might need to start talking faster because things are gonna die before I can even commentate what's happening. Luckily, I didn't get a bully rot here, because if I did, I would have just save quit and reset. The corrosive gun can't kill corrosive enemies. I'm not gonna cry about it. While I clear out Tutorial Town, there's something important to bring up about this damage I'm dealing. You see, like I said, the Gub deals corrosive damage, and these enemies have red health bars, which means they have a 40% resistance to corrosive damage. Let that sink in. This is only 60% of my normal damage. Actually, I deal 75% more damage to armored enemies, so I'll be doing almost triple this damage to robots. But I gotta fight my way through a bunch of non-robots before getting to the robots, so for now we're stuck killing enemies that should, in theory, be a terrible matchup for this gun. In the second group of bandits, I went down, and with the slag worn off on this guy, I actually ended up dying. I think I forgot I'm not playing as Krieg, and the timer made me feel like I needed to play fast. So I actually ended up dying a lot in this run compared to the KerBlaster, but it's all about the timer, so I wasn't too worried. One of the major weaknesses of the Gub is its accuracy. using zero offset this a bit since I had points in precision, but as you can see, shooting enemies that are far away is still pretty painful. I especially felt it in Fight for Your Life. I cleared out the rest of the bandits and made it to Boom Boom. I jumped on top of Big Bertha and knocked Big Boom out of the cannon pretty quick, and after chasing him down as he jumped all across the arena like a coward instead of fighting me, I killed him without any issue. But that damage actually seemed pretty weak considering Boom and Boom are armored, so I should be dealing that 75% increased damage I was talking about. I mean, they died in seconds, but that shouldn't have been plural, so I was a little suspicious. So I did a little testing, and I hope what I learned pisses you off as much as it pissed me off. Nothing I'm about to say is actually new information, I just haven't had a chance to talk about it before. It's time for the first episode of Mick Gets Angry at Borderlands for Being the Way That It Is. After the run, I went back in with no skill points, no class mod, and no relic. The damage I deal should be exactly the number on the item card. I'm using infinities so I can test multiple elements. This one does about 278,000 damage, so with the 75% damage increase I get for using corrosion on armor, we should expect it to do 486,000 damage. I went ahead and shot an ironclad, and sure enough, it did exactly that. However, Boom and Boom are level 82, so they're gonna have a 10% damage reduction for being 2 levels over me. So instead, I should expect to deal about 438,000 damage. Well, that's not quite 438,000. That is 10% less than the listed damage, which means they don't take any increased damage from corrosion. They also don't take any increased or decreased damage from fire. Oh, unless you crit, and then they take a lot more damage from fire. Oh, unless you crit from the back, because then they don't take increased damage from fire. So to sum it all up, the first armored enemies that you ever encounter are not weak to corrosion and do not resist fire. But if you hit the armored part of their head, then they're weak to fire. Gearbox, if you want to teach the player the difference between red, blue, and yellow health bars, this is certainly not the way to do it. Well, anyway, I beat the first boss of the game in just under 11 minutes, which is not a bad time at all. I used Deception to run past these enemies, something I'll be doing very occasionally to save some time. You may think this is cowardly, but it's actually a tactical decision, okay? So it's not cowardly at all. I made my way to Flint's camp, and Magic Missile decided that hitting the enemies is overrated. Eventually, it got its shit together, did its one job, and I killed these guys. But I just like to share the frustration of the homing grenade homing away from the enemies. I decided to fight the enemies on the way up this hill, which went pretty well until Magic Missile failed to slag a scavenger right as I went into Fight for Your Life. There was no way I was getting a second wind on this guy, so I looked around for another enemy to kill, and I found a second scavenger. So I died. I ran back in and killed all 3 scavengers. Yeah, there were 3 of them. If you're wondering why I hate scavengers so much, it's because, fuck them. I went down again, but I managed to get a second wind on an enemy that was more than 5 feet away, so things were looking up. I killed 4 more bandits, and I don't really have anything to say about it. I'm just amazed at how fast the health bars vanish. I encountered my first badass, and I did go down, but I managed to get a second wind and kill the badass. I'd love to blame something other than my aim there, but I really can't. Don't worry, one day I'll get better. Okay, no I won't. I caught up with Claptrap and killed 2 of the bandits. I thought there were 3. Oh, there were 3, but I accidentally killed the first 2 at the same time. Thank you, Boar. The next fight was going pretty well until I walked straight into a fire like I was immortal. I was not. I really gotta stop thinking I'm Krieg, but I managed to get a second wind, pick off the rest of the bandits, and I made it to Flint. I started by taking out Flint's minions because death is a thing that would happen to me if I didn't. I went down just like I predicted because I'm a prophet, but I managed to get a second wind on a non-slagged enemy. It was just an outlaw, but I feel like that's still something that's not supposed to happen. Once Flint was the only enemy left, I started shooting him, if you can believe it. He's notoriously difficult to crit because of his mask, so this fight was gonna be rough. You might notice I was standing behind him, where it is absolutely not difficult to crit him, but my brain told me, crit hard, me shoot body. So that's what I did. It almost didn't work out, but then it worked out, and I made my way to Three Horns Divide. I immediately ran into a badass and a bully rod. So it was time for another tactical retreat. They followed me, so it didn't work. I got a second wind, but I was not about to fight all of them. So I grabbed the thing, got a car, saved Reese for about 5 seconds, grabbed a thing, and oh no, I died. Oh hey, I respawned right next to Sanctuary. That wasn't a skip, it was an accident, I swear. I went to Frostburn Canyon and decided to test out my damage on a Nomad. And at this point, I really shouldn't be surprised, but he died really fast. I decided to run past the rest of the enemies, but I got distracted by doing the opposite of that. I made it to Lilith. Even though I was mostly just getting body shots, the psychos still didn't fare too well. The only thing that could have been an issue was the badass psychos. And you know what? They actually were an issue. I may have slightly overestimated my ability to get crits, but look at this head movement. Are you really gonna tell me this is on me? You are? Oh, okay. Even though it took a little while, they still went down pretty easily. But I can confidently say that I do not think the corrosive gun should be used to fight badass bandits. Go figure. I went to fight cars, and I'm curious if anyone expected this to be difficult, because it wasn't. After an expert parking job, I went to the Bloodshot camp to kill Badma, and I immediately died. As tragic as this death was, I respawned with an additional 300 ammo, so the death was a good thing overall, and some may even say intentional. Badma showed up, and at first I tried to go for crits, but then I just kinda gave up and shot him in the body. He doesn't have health regen, so even though this damage isn't great, it didn't really matter. I made my way into the stronghold, excited by the fact that I was so close to fighting enemies this thing was actually designed to fight. Not to say I was struggling against the bandits, but it could definitely be going better. My reliance on crits was starting to take its toll, but that's because the Gub is inaccurate, and no fault on my part. I cleaned up the rest of the room and the door opened. I used deception to run through the next room and got to the new U, which went really well until it didn't, but luckily this turret is great for second wind. Okay, so apparently there has to be someone in the turret to get a second wind. Good to know. But I got back up anyway and made it to the toilet room. This was no different from the rooms that came before, other than the fact that the room was a circle, the best shape, which gave me a massive boost in power. You see, if I had killed that guy slower, I would have died before I killed him and I would have been okay. The power of circles is simply too strong. A badass nomad showed up and once again, the power of circles was overwhelming. I know this video is supposed to be about the Gub, but it amazes me how many enemies just stop functioning if you walk in a circle around them. Before too long, I had killed enough enemies for Mad Mike to come out, and I tried to just run past him, but the game refused to let me do something so cowardly. I easily killed Mad Mike, and then I tactically ran past every other enemy and made it to Frau. Finally, it was time to fight enemies that are weak to corrosion. Holy hell, that loader wasn't even slagged. I wasted time here. I did not need to kill a single loader in the ramparts. I could have just run through and gone straight to the warden, but it felt so good to just eviscerate these enemies that I couldn't help myself. I made it to the warden, who just didn't stand a chance. Frau and I quickly cleaned up the rest of the loaders and we made it back to Sanctuary. Well, fighting robots was fun while it lasted. At this point, I'm 5.5 minutes behind the KerBlaster run, but there's a whole lot of game left in this game, so anything could happen. I killed 1 or 2 bandits in this camp, but then just decided to use deception to grab the first bomb. I didn't have deception for the second one, but it just didn't matter. Oh no, I died. That's so tragic that I'm closer to where I need to go. This is not a skip, it was an accident, I swear. These robots are already weakened. Yeah, I made it to Wilhelm. And you know what? I'm just gonna show the entire Wilhelm fight. Because even though Wilhelm has never been difficult, I was still floored at how fast I killed him. I grabbed the power core and Frau told me to make the same mistake I've made hundreds of times, and I still do it every time. But to be fair, I don't even learn from my own mistakes. I'm certainly not gonna learn from his. I made it to the fridge, and as always, I just ran past everything with pretty much no problem. At the outwash station, a couple loaders really pretended to try to stop me, and I killed them mostly because I was just bored waiting for the shipping crate. Killing loaders with this thing just feels good, and I'd like to feel good before needing to take on this guy. Well, this was the most difficult fight of the run so far. Not that that's saying much. Now the only thing standing between me and making it back to Sanctuary was a massive horde of robots. So really there was nothing standing in my way, just a lot of stuff dying in my way. And before too long, I made it back to Sanctuary. I met Mordecai at the preserve and held back the urge to absolutely unload on these robots. I had to get them to half health, which was way easier here than it was for the KerBlaster, because I could actually control my damage output. I don't know if it's a selling point to be good at not killing enemies, but I got through that section much faster, so it definitely doesn't feel like a bad thing. I had a feeling the infamous door section wasn't gonna be much of an issue, since it's mostly just more robots, and even though stalkers can be really annoying, Zero can see invisible enemies while in deception. I almost died to the badass loader, but then I chose not to instead. An underrated strategy if you ask me. These skags gave me way more problems than they had any right to, but at least the badass wasn't corrosive. Before too long, the door opened and I made it to Bloodwing. I guess I'll make it a tradition to use the Bloodwing fight to talk about alternatives to these guns. Are there any pistols that can do what the Gub does but better? Well, kinda. The only real draw of the Gub is that massive mag size. You almost never have to reload this thing, but everything else about it is pretty standard. You know what other pistol doesn't need to reload? The Infinity. It never reloads, unless you're Krieg. I honestly believe that a corrosive Infinity does everything the Gub can do, but better. The damage is lower, but the fire rate is high enough to actually have a much higher DPS. Also, the Infinity can be any element other than slag or explosive. I can think of maybe 3 niche cases where you'd rather have a Gub, but I'll talk about those at the end. For now, I think I should explain why you're seeing me throw kunai at Bloodwing, since kunai are clearly not the Gub. Well, I feel like it would be unfair to force a corrosive weapon to fight corrosive phase Bloodwing. I did use an explosive weapon to fight the Warrior, which has a 78% resistance to explosive damage, but the Warrior also has a 76% resistance to corrosive damage, so I don't feel too bad about it. That Bloodwing fight took exactly 1 minute, which is slower than I would have hoped, but at least 4th phase was pretty easy. Well, the robots are behind me now, so we're back to struggling. Never mind, this isn't struggling, this is easy. I ran out of ammo right before going into Brick's throne room, but that's probably not a big deal. I immediately grabbed a little bit from this crate, and I'm sure the bandits will drop some for me. Yep, thank you, weighted drops. If you don't know, when you have less than 40% of your maximum ammo for a specific weapon type, you're significantly more likely to find that ammo type. I died, so it didn't actually matter anyway, but it's still useful information to have. I ran back in and tried to bore through the Goliath to hit the bandit behind him, and it, went exactly according to plan. Despite the fact that I was dealing 40% reduced damage against these bandits, like, I cannot say it enough times, this is 40% reduced damage. The Gub was absolutely annihilating them. I very quickly killed all of them, and Brick decided now was a great time to get attacked by Hyperion. Fighting robots side by side with Brick? Sign me up. Well, I guess you don't need to because I'm already doing it, but sign me up anyway. I want to do it again. Difficulty was not in my vocabulary for this encounter, and if it was, it would have been me saying that this is not difficulty. Anyway, on to opportunity. For some reason, Robot City decided that I don't deserve to fight robots. It was all engineers. Also, obviously, there was the body double, who was a complete joke, but I saw a grand total of like 4 robots in the entirety of this mission. Whatever, Angel made me a voice changer, which meant it was time to take on the bunker. I started making my way up the hill, still a few minutes behind the KerBlaster, but now that I was actually fighting robots, I could pick up the pace a bit. I walked up to the constructor, genuinely not concerned about anything. I went in to fight for your life intentionally just so he couldn't knock me back with his attacks, and uh-oh, I forgot to buy ammo. I'm sure it'll be fine. I was right. I immediately found a couple hundred rounds. Thank you, weighted drops. But then I made it to the infamous baby turrets. Oh, never mind. That was, unsurprisingly, the easiest shit in the world. And just like that, for the first time in the run, the Gub was actually ahead of the KerBlaster by over 5 minutes. But it's only because the KerBlaster couldn't damage those turrets, so if we exclude them, which we probably should, then the Gub is actually still slower. But the Gub was ahead, that's what matters. I made my way up the path to the badass and died to the cowardice of this soldier. I ran back up and made a point to run past him just to show him how it feels. I don't think he noticed, but I made it to the constructor and I accidentally bored through the turrets and two-shot it. I'm fine with using bore normally, but that didn't really feel fair since it was clearly a glitch. So I waited a few seconds just to make up for it before moving on to the bunker. The autocannons were actually surprisingly hard. If hard means dying in a few seconds. Even without slag, they were just bad at existing. The bunker showed up, and many of you probably know that there is a way to instantly kill the bunker with bore, so I tried really hard to not instantly kill the bunker with boar. I didn't have to try for long because the bunker didn't survive for long. Unfortunately though, I did not get a sham. I never get a sham. There are 139 guns in this game, so if I do this with every single one, do you think one day I'll finally get a sham? According to math, there's a 99% chance I'd get at least one, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if I never got one. With my shamless head held low, I made my way into Control Core. If Jack really didn't want me to kill Angel, he probably should have sent enemies that I can't kill in under 2 seconds. Okay, to be fair, that guy isn't slagged. The moral is, the Gub is really good at killing robots. It's not particularly bad at killing anything, but against robots, I stopped bothering to use slag half the time, because if I could get crits, they would die before Magic Missile even got to them. I did not get crits, so I should have slagged them, but if you point that out, I'll cry. Look, any gun that can kill a badass loader this fast is, you know, pretty good, kinda. That definitely wasn't slow. Well, I finished Control Core and I'm in Sawtooth Cauldron now. I didn't watch the cutscene, so Frau is probably fine, probably not shot through the chest, unlike this ambush commander who... Okay, that was his head, not his chest, but I wrote that down before I looked at the footage and I just didn't expect myself to actually land headshots. Killing the other 3 was actually pretty difficult. Not the killing them part, that was easy. It was the brisk walk to get from one to the other that was really slowing me down. With all 4 of them dead, I wasn't getting a second wind. With all 4 of them dead, oh come on! Okay, I got a second wind and made my way outside. I tried to get some kills on the way up, but after going down again, I decided to just run around these buildings and use deception to make it the rest of the way up, which felt a little cheap, but it's just a tactical retreat. I really couldn't stay alive for a second. Luckily, these turrets are made out of metal and not flesh, so that was the easiest second wind of my life. But now that I say it out loud, flesh turrets sound terrifying and the bandits should invest in some. I made it to the lever, but because I ran on the right side of this area instead of the left, the game decided I was never up here at all. I turned around and ran away from the objective so Brick could tell me I was at the objective, and of course I went down again. If this were a flesh turret, I'd be dead. Just saying. I got a second wind, flipped the lever, went down again, but destroyed Boombringer before dying. Apparently my corpse was looking at the explosion, so my intimidation factor was completely gone. But dying isn't super intimidating anyway. I tried my best to kill Mortar, but oh no, he's gone. Anyway, I made it to the top and only one buzzard spawned, and of course, with my luck, it was a badass. That's kind of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, badass buzzards, of course, have more health, but they also don't have health regen. Never mind, it doesn't matter, normal buzzards are better. I killed some of the bandits while I waited for the other buzzards, but for some reason, they just refused to spawn. I assumed it was because they wouldn't spawn until the badass buzzard was dead, so I very slowly killed it. And would you look at that, the other buzzards immediately spawned. I don't know who decided how much health badass buzzards should have, but comparing it to the normal ones, it seems like they may have accidentally added an extra 0, or it was intentional and they're just a bad person. With Sawtooth Cauldron out of the way, the Gub was now 16 minutes ahead of the KerBlaster. Even if we ignore the baby turrets, which we probably should, that's still 10 minutes ahead after a bandit camp. And it's pretty much just robots from here on out. Before, I was hoping to beat the game in under 4 hours, but now I think the goal should be to beat it in under 3.5. I may be able to fight off the entirety of Hyperion and every bandit clan I come across, but a single broken ladder is an insurmountable obstacle. At least for Mordecai it is. I could easily use deception and just ignore all the enemies in these pumping stations, but killing them is more fun. I hit the final valve and actually ran out of ammo right as I was running away. That's at least the second time that's happened in this run, which probably means something. Does the Gub just chew through ammo? I don't know, maybe. Anyway, I made it to the nostalgia area and fought Saturn, something I think I'll do for every gun. I accidentally bored through the turrets. Whoops. Well, even if I hadn't done that, he couldn't stand up to the sheer damage of the Gub, something that no sane person has ever said up to this moment. Actually, I'm the one that said it. Something that no sane person has ever said. I cleared out the robots on the bridge, grabbed the location of the warrior, and just like that, I was at the end. Could I beat the final mission in less than 30 minutes? That's a really long time. I think the answer is yes. The first door was all robots, so that was pretty easy. Heroes Pass had a surprising number of people, but one of those people people was Brick. Fighting people side by side with Brick? I guess I have nothing to worry about. I did almost die 3 times in quick succession, but I don't fear death, so I had nothing to worry about. Somehow I didn't die and I made it to Jack. I was dealing so little damage to this man. It doesn't help that he's insanely hard to slag and his shield has 60% corrosive resistance. Probably, after the boom boom thing, I genuinely don't know anymore. Luckily, he decided to go for his stupid laser attack and he stood still long enough for me to rip through his shield. He went to the moonshot console to call for his shield surveyor, but before he got the chance, I managed to slag him, and his AI seemed to break just long enough for me to kill him. The warrior was released and I had exactly 13 minutes to kill him. 13 minutes sounds like a long time, but remember, I said he has a 76% resistance to corrosive damage, and I was definitely feeling it. Even with multiple volleys of crits, his health bar was barely ticking down while my ammo was quickly dwindling. By the time he was at half health, I was already running around the arena desperately opening crates. I was completely out of ammo. I ran back to my favorite hiding spot and got 144 shots, which really didn't seem like enough. But when he came back to his final position, I found more ammo on the way, and it was more than enough to finish him off. I killed Jack, picked up the key, and finished the run with a time of 3 hours, 26 minutes, and 26 seconds. Well, the Gub performed significantly better than expected. Not that I was expecting all that much. And the slow projectiles and low accuracy really weren't all that noticeable. Mostly because I was using Zero. Okay, 100% because I was using Zero. Which means I guess I should test it on the other characters and then give my final thoughts. On Salvador, obviously it does a lot of damage because Salvador is the way he is, but dual wielding them like this looks really stupid. With Inconceivable and 5 shots or 6, you never need to reload, which might actually be a bad thing. The biggest issue for Sal is that the massive mag size doesn't let him take advantage of Money Shot, but other than that, it's definitely not bad. Maya's fire rate increases definitely make the high base damage and mag size shine. Reloading takes up time, so being able to shoot fast without needing to reload constantly is really nice. On Axton, it's basically the same. Metal Storm makes the Gub kind of insane. Gage can make any gun good with Anarchy, but hardly ever reloading is actually a bad thing for her, so definitely don't use it to stack Anarchy, but once you have those stacks, it'll kill just as well as anything else. And then we have Krieg. Krieg's mag size gets bigger as he gains Bloodlust stacks, and since this is a corrosive weapon, it'll stack Bloodlust really fast. Also, it's good for stacking Elemental Elation, which will give him more fire rate and even more mag size, so it quickly snowballs into an unstoppable and unending torrent of Gub. So there you have it. The Gub is really good on Zero and Krieg, pretty decent on Axton and Maya, and not the best on Sal or Gage. That is the exact definition of B tier. But there's just one problem. I don't know why you would use it. Like I said earlier, I think a Corrosive Infinity is better in almost every way. The main benefit of the Gub is its massive mag size, but that doesn't mean anything compared to a gun whose mag size is yes. I said there were 3 reasons to use the Gub over the Infinity, and those would be 1, if you're Salvador and want to be able to use Money Shot without setting up a glitch. 2, if you're Gage and you don't want to have to use a Necromancer class mod to have access to the Anarchy tree. Or 3, you don't want to farm for hours to get specifically a Corrosive Infinity. One benefit of element locked weapons is you always know what you're gonna get. Other than those 3 situations, I think the Infinity is just better in every way. And I already said that the Gub isn't even good on Gage or Sal, so that's enough for me to put the Gub in C tier. I break down what all the tiers mean in the KerBlaster video, but C tier just means it's good enough to be in A or B tier, but there's a clearly better alternative. It did beat the game faster than the KerBlaster, so that's gotta count for something, but I just can't justify putting it any higher. I will now say the names of everyone who is a member of the channel. Patron shoutouts. If you want to see my videos a week in advance and vote on what challenges I do next, the link is in the description. Large and also large thanks to Mikrasiru, who learned how to live underwater without breathing. Just, not for very long. Extra special thanks to Shedder Dude, who sold his soul to become the greatest juggler of all time. Tarkus Lives, who learned how to skip dialogue in real life by just covering his ears. And Rocklead, whose middle name is actually Danger. First and last name as well. Special thanks to Voltflow, who fears nothing. Except worms, but that's fair. Zilland, who decided gravity is lame and just started flying instead. Uwoozy, who is a giant plant person just trying to blend in. Drac, who has never had to pay for anything. On an unrelated note, the police are looking for Drac. Bayfire, who can run faster than any car, which isn't that impressive now that I think about it. And that kid Bruno, who was frozen in a block of ice for 5,000 years and honestly is not that impressed with everything we've done since then. Thank you again to everyone who supports me on Patreon. You guys help make what I do possible.